Hello everyone, this is Thomas, one of the co-creators of the Japan Archives. Just a quick thing before you get into these first few episodes of our podcast. We're a few months into making this show now. I am recording this particular bit in January 2020, many months after our first episode has aired. And Heather and myself just want to say that if you want to see if this podcast is for you, if the editing, storytelling, and sound quality is enough to keep you around, then perhaps skip ahead to our most recent episodes to see where we are at, and then work your way backwards. Of course, if you don't wish to do that, that's all good. Just be gentle with our episodes until our most recent ones in January 2020. We've come a long way and have made many improvements, so if you listen to these first few and think it might not be good enough for your ears, go on. Perhaps skip ahead to our most recent. Anyway, guys, that's enough from me. On with the show.
Well, it says it's recording.
I am showing recording.
I hope so. Hey guys, this is
This is Jujitsu Thomas.
Just put my teeth in. Hey guys, this is the Japan Archives. This is our redo of episode 2, just to get it to the same format as our... I suddenly can't speak.
Welcome to the Japan Archives. This is the re-recording of episode 2, previously recorded solo by Tom, now joined by Heather. Hey!
Well, thank you for that, Heather. Thank you for recording that for me, because I was having a lot of problems speaking just then, so I definitely appreciate that.
Do you want to give it one more go? One more go?
No, I'm happy to keep that in. You've done the intro now, so we'll keep it. Change things up a bit. That's just so strange. We've literally spent the last hour talking, and as soon as we press record, I'm like, I can't speak anymore. Anyway, this is the Japan Archives, episode 2, Iron Rat, where I will be telling Heather the story of the Japanese yokai known as Tesso. Now, you'll have to remind me, Heather, did you listen to this episode when I did it solo, or do you still not know this story?
I'm going to go with, I don't know this story.
Sounds like a lie, but okay.
I claim ignorance.
You claim ignorance. Okay, we're going to go with that. We're going to go with the ignorance statement, and I'll just plow right on with the story.
I don't know. Iron Rat, is this based on the Zodiac?
It is not based on the Zodiac.
Oh.
It sounds like you're grasping at straws to sound ignorant, so I'm just going to start going. If you think of any questions while we go in, let me know.
Excellent, will do.
So, the story starts with the monk called Reigo. Now, he was a Buddhist monk who lived in Kyoto at the time. So, he wakes up in the morning, he dresses, goes about his everyday duties at his temple, which is called the Temple of Midera, which still exists in Kyoto to this day. Now, he carries out his morning prayers and continues on with his day. And as far as he could tell, today was going to be pretty much the same as every other day.
So I have a question. What are the everyday no, I can't talk. What? What? Okay. What are everyday duties at Buddhist temples? Like, what do the priests do?
Okay, so I did a little bit of research into that. Couldn't find a schedule for the Temple of Midera. But later on, we're going to bring in a different temple called Enrakuji, which also exists in Kyoto. And I found a schedule for those monks, so I thought I'd just briefly tell you that one. I don't know how different it would be to these monks, because obviously, even though Buddhism is one overall religion, it does have many different sects, so they might have different schedules. So for Enrakuji, the monks would traditionally wake up and wash around 5:30 in the morning, so quite early, and go into their meditation services around 6 a.m. They wouldn't eat breakfast until this was all finished, so around 7:30 they would eat, and by 8 o'clock go to class. They'd stay in class until around 12 o'clock, where they go for lunch, go to work at 1, and return to class around 3 o'clock. By the time the evening comes around, so 5:30, they would go and do their evening services, have their dinner at 6:30, Then later at about 7 p.m. they would go and bathe and clean themselves, and at 10 o'clock it would be lights out and they would go to bed, and the cycle would repeat itself the next day.
Oh, actually sounds like a pretty nice schedule.
Sounds kind of relaxing for a Buddhist monk. I don't know what work would mean for a monk. I don't know if it's teaching new students, pupils.
Maybe.
What are monk students called? Acolytes? Who knows? We should have checked that out beforehand. Anyway.
A future episode.
Yes, we can do a flashback like, hey guys, remember this thing we didn't know? This is what it's called. See, tune in next week because we might answer questions we previously didn't know the answers to. Anyway, so he's going about his day. He's expecting it to be like every other day. But today actually was going to turn out differently. He received news, and the news was actually a request from the emperor. Now, the emperor at the time this Buddhist monk lived was the Emperor Shirakawa. And Emperor Shirakawa reigned from about 1073 to 1087. So, a relatively short reign, only, 14 years? So yeah, a short reign for an emperor.
Yeah.
So at this time, he was desperate for an heir. So he came to the priest Rego with a request on the premise that if he helped him, it would be beneficial for not only him, but also his temple. So his wife at this time had fallen pregnant, and the task that Rego was given was to pray every day for the safe birth of the emperor's future child, who would hopefully become the heir and next emperor on the chrysanthemum throne. Now, of course, this was a really big honor. The monk had been requested personally by the emperor to fulfill this task for him, so of course he couldn't refuse. Who says no to the emperor? Especially when he has promised him lots of money to help expand his temple and make it more prestigious in Kyoto, which of course Rego would definitely want to happen. So the monk, he starts to pray, he prays, and, he prays some more. The months slowly trickle by until he finally receives news from the emperor of the safe birth of his child, which of course is great news. Rega has fulfilled his purpose. The child hasn't died in birth, which, it's medieval Japan at the time. It's highly likely that children, even the mothers, would die in childbirth. So Rego has watched over and helped fulfill his promise. The child turned out to be a boy, which was good because traditionally on the chrysanthemum throne, only men could rule. There were a few female emperors at the time, which we will delve into another day, because I think it would be quite interesting.
Ah, yes.
But traditionally, men could only be the emperors of Japan. Now, if you are still listening to the podcast right now, you might faintly hear the going home chime in the background. I'm sure you're all used to it by now, so just listen away while I'm talking and it'll end soon.
Someday I will sing the chime going home. I will learn the words and I will sing it.
I'm tempted one day just to go outside with a recorder and record it and put it as the end tune at the end of an episode. Why not?
Could we do that? Is it copyrighted? I don't know if it's copyrighted.
I'm not sure. Probably should look into that before we do it. But I think it would be kind of interesting. We hear it every time we record because this is the only time we can record.
So a future episode, we really should do the history of the going home songs because there's different ones too.
Oh, so the way you live is different to the one where I live. So we could both record them for an episode.
I don't hear one here.
There's no children where you live. You're in a barren wasteland. Wait, where do you live?
No, there's a lot of children, but they just don't have music when they go, when they should go home. I guess they just go straight home. I don't know, but there's no music.
There's no curfew where you live. They just stay out all night.
I guess. I don't know. It makes me so sad. I miss the chimes.
Aww. Well, okay. If I can't record them for the podcast, I'll record it and send it to you. How about that?
Thank you.
Anyway, where were we? She's given birth. The emperor should therefore fulfill his promise to the priest. So he's waiting some more for this promise to be fulfilled, to get the money for, the expansions of his temple to begin. But it never happens. And the monk's patience was no doubt replaced by anger eventually. Because, even religious people can't escape the world of politics. And it turned out that other temples at the time had manipulated the emperor into reneging on his promise to Reigo. So basically, he and the temple were no longer going to get any of the money.
Wait a minute. There are rivalries between monks?
Well, in terms of this story, there is definitely a rivalry between these two temples. So, like I said before, there was different sects of Buddhism. So, like, these two sects were... Maybe enemies is too strong a word, but they were definitely rivals, and obviously one sect wanted to be noticed and followed more than the other one. So yeah, there is this rivalry between the two different sects of Buddhism, and because each one wants to be more prestigious than the other. So they've convinced the emperor to no longer give him the money, which sends Reigo into like an anger, into a rage, and obviously he's feeling betrayed by his emperor,
Yeah.
the man that he and no doubt the country looked up to as their focal point. Well, Heather, let me ask you, if you feeling hurt and betrayed by your emperor, what would you do? What would be the logical thing you would do in retaliation?
I think I would probably go and possibly protest and go ask, excuse me, weren't you supposed to maybe give me a little bit of money? Maybe I prayed for your son there, and it's all good. So hey, don't forget. I guess that's not really protesting. I guess maybe politely asking with a very sad face.
You're too nice for your own good. That's your problem. Like, sorry, where's my money? Please give me my money. That would be great. Thank you. Don't mean to bother you. Sorry.
Okay, maybe I would hold up a sign so I can protest. How about you, Thomas? What would you do?
I'm not sure what I'd do, but I'll tell you what the monk did, and that was he went on hunger strike.
That is not the reaction I would have. No.
No, I don't think I could go on hunger strike either.
No.
But yes, he went on hunger strike, and he remained steadfast to his fasting until he actually died from it.
So are you saying he remained steadfasting?
Oh my god. I need to be careful what I say, lest I fall victim to a Heather pun. Yes, Heather. Let's go with that. He was steadfasting until he died.
I'm so sorry to make a joke at your expense, Reigo. I apologize. I am so sorry. I am so sorry.
So he's died.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But his spirit did not go quietly into the night. Such was the anger he'd felt from his broken promise that he actually was reborn as a plague of rats. And the rats were what became known as Tesso.
Reigo, I apologize. I'm so sorry for the pun. Please do not come for the plague of rats. Oh my gosh. Okay, keep going. I'm so sorry. Now I'm worried.
You're worried that a plague of rats is going to turn up at your house now, aren't you?
Just a little bit.
I think you're safe unless you have these following things. So the rats themselves ravaged the city of Kyoto, devouring like Buddhist tomes, sutras, and scrolls. In particular, attacking the temple libraries of the Buddhist sects that turned the emperor against him, such as the temple of Enrakuji, which is one of the main rivals that Reigo and his temple had at the time. Now, eventually, once he had sought the destruction that he craved, he departed. Presumably now his spirit was sated, he was satisfied, and he could finally go on to the afterlife. And the yokai Tesso was never seen again on the streets of Kyoto. Now there's other stories I found online, which I haven't found in any of the books I have yet, that say that this spirit of Reigo or of Tesso also caused the young prince to fall ill and ultimately die. But as we know, like historically, Shirakawa desperately needed an heir to the throne, and the child that was born was the child Taruhito, who eventually grew up to be the next emperor of Japan. And there are other stories that I've read where it says that the emperor's son did pass away at the age of 4, but right now, from what I'm from the research I've done, I have yet to find a child of Shirakawa who died at the age of 4. Before Prince Taruhito was born, Shirakawa did have a son called Prince Atsufumi, who died at the age of 2. So whether what I've read in the books I have is an inconsistency, or whether the story itself is based, or whether the story is more magical in its telling is a different matter.
So the actual destruction of the sutras and scrolls and basically paper in Kyoto, is that actually based on historical events, or is this whole story more fantastical?
As for the plague of rats which ravaged the city of Kyoto at the time, I haven't found any mentioning of it. However, it's interesting to note that the Temple of Midera, where Reigo is supposed to have lived, was burnt several times during Shirakawa's reign, and it was burnt down by monks of a rival sect from Mount Hiei, which is actually where the Temple of Enrakuji can be found. So it's interesting that there was definitely this rivalry which may have inspired this story of revenge at a later date in Japanese history.
Wow, monks are a little more violent than I expected. Usually you think of, religious like temples and things being places of peace. I don't expect to hear about rivalries and burning down and Tesso. It's a little surprising.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you go to the temples these days, like whether it's a Buddhist temple or a Shinto shrine, they're always calm, they're always relaxing, they're always, talking peace and spreading peace. So to hear that there were these old rivalries, even within what is basically, what is at its focal point the same religion, is interesting to note that they would diverge to the point that they would consider each one their enemy, and that they have to be, maybe not destroyed, but at least weakened so that they can become stronger.
Well, I definitely like and appreciate the temples much better now than I probably would have back in which time period was this story set? Which time period?
It's a good question.
You're welcome. My challenge.
So like we said, the Emperor Shirakawa was reigning from 1073 to 1087, and this would fall into the time period known as the Heian period, which went from 794 to 1185 AD.
Oh, I like the temples much better in Reiwa. I much prefer going now. I would not have wanted to go back then so much. I like now. Now is good and peaceful. The temples are beautiful. I want to go visit.
Now when it's calm and relaxing, and you won't get attacked.
Yes, I agree. And I'm sure a lot of temples probably very fine back in historic times. So it's just still surprising to hear about rivalries and burning down temples. Oh, there's so many temples and shrines in Japan, like even like very small ones. Like when you just walk outside, you can see just a tiny little shrine someone has put up, and sometimes there'll be little offerings and things to them. So I mean, it's nice to see. Like definitely one of the prettiest parts of Japan is being able to see these really calm, peaceful temples.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. But yeah, that is fundamentally the story of Tesso, who was originally a lovely little monk called Reigo. So what did you think? It's something a little different. We've gone back into the land of make-believe. Well, a bit of factualness, a bit of fiction.
Like a lot of good stories that has a little bit of both in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite fascinating. I definitely like hearing this for the first time. It's fantastic.
You sound so believable, Heather. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Oh, do we need to talk about the poem?
Yes, so I think it's time for you to tell me a little bit about today's poem and the poet behind it.
Okay. So the poem this week comes from the Ogura Hyakunin Isshu, which translates to 100 poems, one poem each. The poet today is Ono no Komachi. She was born sometime around the mid-9th century, so that's Heian, right?
Yes, indeed, the same period that this story is from, yes.
Thank you. I'm learning. Later, she would become known as one of the 36 poetry immortals, and her poetry can be found in many other compilations.
So I had a question, actually.
Yes.
So is this poem from the same book of an earlier episode? The answer is yes. the Fujiwara one.
Ah, yes, it is. Fujiwara no Yoshitaka. Did I say it properly? I'm like, dang it, should I go back and look at my notes? Yes, it is episode 3, Fujiwara no Yoshitaka.
Okay, very good, thank you.
You're welcome. And she's a waka poet, and she was possibly a lady-in-waiting, and she was attested to be a woman of great beauty who treated her lovers cruelly. But it's probably just a legend. I hope so. Her poetry is quite beautiful, so her work is in numerous books of poetry as well.
Okay, what other books is she mentioned in then?
So she's also in the Kokinshu and Gosenshu, but about only 21 poems are seen to be authentic. There are also many poems that are thought to be hers, but may not be. The Komachi Shu, or the collected poems of Komachi, created after her death, may also not contain some of her poetry as well.
Oh, that's quite interesting. I do wonder why they were attributed to her, but I guess that might be something we'll never know.
Good possibility. Well, unless there could be something in like Japanese literature that we just don't have access to yet based on our limited Japanese knowledge. We're studying, just very, very slowly.
That's probably true. The more we study, the better we'll get, the more stuff we can tell everyone about. So, yeah, we need to work on it.
Yes, we'll keep trying.
Okay, so I feel like I know her a little bit better now. If you're happy to read me the poem, I'm all ears.
All right, let's go.
花の色は移りにけりないたずらに我が身世に降る眺めさしまに
So what would that be in English, Heather?
Okay, so one translation says, "A life in vain, my looks, talents faded, like these cherry blossoms paling in the endless rains that I gaze out upon, alone."
Feels like a kind of a sad poem.
Well, the interesting thing is this translation definitely has more of a sad kind of feeling to it, but sometimes the poems can be translated a little bit differently. This translation definitely has that feel of perhaps she's looking back at the end of her life thinking, oh, everything's fading, everything's dying, and I don't have so much now left to my life. I'm very sad about my looks disappearing and growing older. Depending, I think, on the translation, it could have a little bit different feel, but this translation definitely has that kind of wistful sadness to it.
I definitely would agree with you there. Well, thank you for that poem. It's kind of bittersweet, like tinged with sadness. You definitely get the feeling like, you know, she feels she's growing old. She doesn't have what she used to have. So it's sad, but it's definitely a very beautiful poem, at least in my opinion.
I think, yeah, definitely, depending on the person, you know, you can look back on your life and regret the things that you don't have anymore or that you didn't do. But I think to turn it to a little bit more positive is to perhaps not think about as, you know, your looks have faded. Your looks have changed as you grow older. Things change, and your talents, maybe their talents aren't the same as they were when you were young, but you have more mastery of them as you grow older. So there's my positive portion of the poetry reading.
It's a very positive outlook to it, so yeah, I think you always have to look at the good and the bad when you analyze something.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, Heather, thank you for the poem.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the history.
No, you're welcome. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm glad it was a completely new story you'd never heard before.
You're so welcome.
But I think that's going to do it. I think that's about it from us today, guys. Thank you for listening. As ever, thank you for tuning in. If you want to learn more about Japanese history, you can check out our growing database that we're working on over at historyofjapan.co.uk. You can also find us on Twitter at A History of Japan. We also have an Instagram. You can find us at nexus_travels. That's NEXUS_travels, because obviously all our social media has different names. So please be sure to remember all the different ones when you're following us everywhere. But that's it from me. Heather, anything else to say?
Oh my God. Pressure. Thank you guys for listening, and we hope you enjoyed it. And be sure to tune in next time when we'll have more interesting poems and Japanese history.
Once again, guys, thank you very much for listening and speak to you next time. See ya!
またね